Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about a beat-up pickup, a fake cop scare, and a masterclass in petty public justice. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. No badge, no ticket, just justice for a handicapped spot hog. I can't stand it when someone parks in a handicapped spot who doesn't need it. It boils my blood every time I see it. My father used a wheelchair the last several years of his life, and watching how hard it was for him to get in and out of a car, even with that extra space, left a lasting impression. It's not just inconvenient for people who actually need those spaces, it's flat out disrespectful. I'm also retired law enforcement. For decades, I had the authority to address that kind of inconsiderate behavior head on. Now, though, not my job anymore. But that doesn't mean I've lost the itch when I see someone acting like the rules don't apply to them. So the other day, I'm heading over to the local beer distributor. Not a massive store, just one of those small-town places with one entrance, one exit, and a parking lot that barely holds a dozen cars. As I'm pulling into the lot, this guy zips in right ahead of me in a beat-up pickup truck. No handicap tags, no placard hanging from the rear view. Still, he pulls directly into the handicap spot right next to the front door like it was reserved for him personally. I park in a regular spot a few feet away, watching him. There's no way he has any legitimate reason to be in that space. He hops out of the truck like he's late for a meeting. No limp, no cane, no struggle, just pure entitlement. I sit for a second, debating with myself. Do I say something? Do I let it go? I'm not on the clock anymore, but man, it was gnawing at me. I get out and walk in just a few seconds behind him. He's already picked up a case of beer and is waiting in line to pay. I pass him to grab my own case of lager, and the perfect little idea hits me like a flash of lightning. I lean in slightly and say, just loud enough for him to hear, "Hey man, just so you know, a cop just pulled into the lot." I didn't expect a reaction that fast. The eyes go wide. He mutters something that sounds an awful lot like, "Oh crap," under his breath, drops the case of beer right there at the register, and sprints, full sprint, out the door like he's late for court. I couldn't help but smirk. I calmly take my place in line where he had just been standing. The cashier looks at me and raises an eyebrow. I shrug and say nothing. After paying, I head out to my truck, and lo and behold, he's still out there, slowly circling the lot like a shark looking for prey. When he sees me, he slows down and rolls down his window. "Hey man, where'd the cop go?" I look at him straight-faced and reply, "I don't know," with a casual shrug, then climb into my truck and drive off. The guy had no clue he'd just been played. He'd panicked so hard he abandoned his beer and lost his spot in line, and all over a spot he never should have parked in to begin with. If he'd just parked like a normal, decent human being, he would have been in and out 5 minutes earlier. But no, he had to take the shortcut, and it cost him. I hope the whole thing rattled him enough that he thinks twice the next time he sees a handicapped space. Maybe now he'll look for that blue placard or those special license plates before assuming the rules don't apply to him. I'll never know for sure if he figured out he'd been messed with, or if he kept circling for another 10 minutes thinking a patrol car was hiding behind a dumpster somewhere. But I like to imagine he went home, cracked open whatever beer he ended up buying, and sat there wondering if that beer cost him more than just a few bucks. Sometimes justice doesn't need a badge. Made my day. I cannot stand those people who think their convenience overrides everyone else. And our second story. More effort, you say? No problem. First job out of college, besides that one day I put in at a call center, it was a small family-owned apartment company in a Midwestern city. I was hired as a rental agent. It was great. I had my own office, and I kept my own schedule, left to my own devices. I discovered that I was ambitious and loved working hard. The lobby was always full of prospective clients, and I made great sales. The owners were both my direct supervisors, both elderly and conservative, but they loved me, and I wanted to make them glad they had hired me. The job was only 5 months long during the busy summer rental season, but at the end of it, they said that they would love to have me back next summer since I'd done such a good job. So being somewhat burned out by 22 years of schooling, I just decided to not work again the rest of the year and live off the bundle I'd made working there. I called in spring of the next year, and they were glad to hear from me, told me when my start date would be, and even said they could rent me a discounted apartment if I needed one. Awesome. I move in, and I'm living in one of my own buildings. Same as the year before, I'm happy and ambitious. I have no commute, and once again, I chase every lead I can. This time, I know the ropes, and I become far more involved with other aspects of the business, including coordinating maintenance, delivery of post, and even fill in as the receptionist. At the end of another summer, they tell me how great I am and that once again I have a job lined up. Once again, I decided to just take the rest of the year off. I'm thinking that it's only a matter of time before I get offered a full-time job since my boss was the only other rental agent and he was getting close to retirement. I spend the year in my cheap but nice apartment and even continue coming into the office at least 1 hour a day to fill in at reception. Sometimes I work full days if they need extra body. Whatever they need, I was committed to them. Then came the third summer, my first day back on the job, and I'm in a meeting with my boss's son, who we'll call Frank. Frank was a fresh graduate of business school, and he'd started work at his family's business. He seemed to take delight in telling me on my first day back that he's cutting my commission by 50%. He tells me to my face that he could easily hire a new college grad to work for even less, and I should be grateful they're willing to give me as much as they are. Both of my supervisors were present at the meeting, and they both looked very uncomfortable, but they didn't intervene. I was shocked. Even if what he told me was true, there's no way you should speak to loyal employees like that. He did say I could earn a $1,500 bonus at the end of the summer, but this was not put in writing, and the conditions to earn it were not defined. I just assumed I wouldn't see it. He said that it was so they could get a better effort out of me, but I figured this was just a generic move out of some MBA textbook somewhere, since I'd always done more than my share for this business, and he hadn't even been there to witness most of it. Frank's mom and uncle had both brought me back 2 times after my first summer since they liked me. At this point, I'd been waiting all year for this job, and despite this ominous sign, I still wanted to try and get a full-time job with them. But I was furious from the start and decided that if Frank wanted a better effort from me, he would have it. Since Frank was my new supervisor, I went to work on him, sucking up to him and generally reserving myself around him to lure him into a false sense of security. Meanwhile, I never worked harder. I accepted every single appointment I could to show apartments no matter what time of day they were at. My favorite were weekends when I could book one early and one late appointment. I'd sit in the vacant office all day on my computer earning overtime, even though in the past I would have just gone home and gone off the clock. My campaign against Frank had worked, and he would regularly sign my time cards without seeming to realize what was going on, but I was earning so much overtime that I was actually getting more money than before when I got a large commission for my sales. I was working 70 hours a week, but I was determined that Frank not screw me out of money I rightfully felt was mine. Eventually, Frank's mom saw me at the office at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday, and after investigating, told me I was taking way too much overtime. Things began to deteriorate at that point. At the end of the summer, they told me I'd earned 0 of my $1,500 bonus, even though I had literally worked every single day of the summer, including weekends and holidays, and did not ask me back again. But I'd figured that in the end, they wouldn't have hired me anyway because I wasn't family. I still ended up making more than any previous summer and had another 7 cheap months left on my lease, so in the end, they still did right by me. But I felt betrayed by Frank and disillusioned that a company I'd worked so hard and well for could behave so callously towards me. I thought that all companies looked for were dedicated and loyal employees, and since they'd asked me back so many times, I thought I was doing right. I learned that hard work and rewards were not necessarily linked, a tough lesson for a kid just out of college. You should talk to the owner and parents one-on-one as people about what happened. Everything may be done and over as far as your employment, but they still have a Frank to deal with, and a Frank can ruin a business. And our last story. Defending disability rights in our own driveway. I've lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband and son for several years. And for most of that time, our HOA has been relatively lenient and even helpful. But recently, things have started to spiral out of control, especially when it comes to a matter close to our hearts, our handicap-accessible van. For context, both my husband and my son have disabilities. My husband uses a scooter most of the time and a power wheelchair when needed, and my son uses a wheelchair as well. We've always had a wheelchair-accessible minivan, but because it could only accommodate one wheelchair at a time, it severely limited our family's ability to travel together. We couldn't afford to modify the van to fit both chairs, which left us feeling stuck. Several months ago, a woman at our church who had inherited a wheelchair-accessible van that could fit both wheelchairs and had a powered platform for a scooter donated it to us. She had no use for it, and I can't even begin to express how much of a blessing it was. The van, a modified Ford Transit, was everything we needed, allowing the three of us to finally travel together. It was an amazing gift that we could never have afforded on our own. The only problem was that our garage couldn't accommodate this new vehicle due to the size and design of the rear platform, as well as the modifications we had to make to the garage to install a wheelchair ramp. The van had to be parked in our driveway overnight. This became a problem when our HOA stepped in. They have a strict rule that no vehicles can be parked in driveways overnight, and they also have a rule that commercial vehicles cannot be parked in driveways at all, except when driven by service personnel for repairs. Now, while our van is modified for accessibility, it is classified as a commercial vehicle due to its design, and we were immediately in violation of these HOA rules. We explained our situation, emphasizing that the van was specifically modified to accommodate my husband and son's disabilities, but the HOA wasn't having it. They argued that a regular minivan could be modified for accessibility and that we could expand our garage to fit the vehicle. Both suggestions were impractical and didn't address the real issue, our need to have a vehicle that could fit both wheelchairs. We tried everything to make them see reason. We went door to door, speaking with our neighbors and asking them to pressure the board to make an exception. Many of them were sympathetic, but despite this, the HOA refused to budge. The board declined to hear any request to repeal the rule and made it clear that if we didn't comply, we would be fined. Then the HOA announced that after a 15-day grace period, any vehicles in violation would be towed. That deadline was fast approaching, and we had no solution in sight. That's when we decided to take matters into our own hands. We hired a lawyer to help us navigate the situation. With his help, we were able to argue our case and secure an exception from the HOA, allowing us to keep the van in our driveway. It wasn't an easy battle, but we still don't feel fully comfortable with the way the HOA handled it, but we're relieved that we were able to keep the vehicle we so desperately need. The lawyer also helped us with a more long-term solution, ensuring that the HOA cannot enforce such rules on us again without proper accommodations for disability. We still have a long road ahead with the HOA, especially as some of our neighbors are working to join the board in hopes of changing the rules for good. But for now, we can breathe a little easier knowing that we can continue to use the van and we no longer have to worry about getting fined or having it towed. It's unfortunate that it took a lawyer and a lot of stress to get the situation resolved, but I'm relieved that we're able to keep our van and our peace of mind. We're looking forward to the day when the rules are fair for everyone, regardless of their situation. What gets me is the HOA's complete lack of empathy. Their suggestion that you expand the garage or get a different van reeks of privilege and ignorance. Modifying a garage isn't a quick weekend project. It's expensive, invasive, and not always feasible, especially when your home's already adapted with ramps and accessible infrastructure. And pretending a regular minivan could do the job? That just shows they never bothered to listen. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.